Well, I haven't had a comeback in a long time, but it happens to the best of us, right? I'm working on a 2020 Ford Explorer police car, the 3.3 hybrid, and I was having an issue with the parking brake setting a code. I was having an issue with the parking brake setting a code, and we went through this thing. We combed through this thing. I mean, everything. The vehicle came apart. I ripped apart like the windshield wiper area and everything else. I mean, I really did a number pulling this car apart and then putting it back together, right? So we figured it out. I got the vehicle fixed. It was actually the parking brake switch. The pinpoint diagnostics are different from a passenger vehicle as opposed to a cop car. A cop car has a 8-pin connector. A passenger vehicle has a 12-pin connector. So Ford was in the process of actually working up diagnostics for us and stuff like that. So a lot of things that we were doing were new to us. You know, it wasn't just simply just reach out, grab you, and figure out what it was. A lot of it was new stuff. So we figured it out, put a new switch and stuff in it, put the harness and everything back together, put the vehicle back together. Needless to say, this vehicle actually got a new module. And there are 4 brake lines that go to the module. Here we are a couple months later, and I'm thinking to myself, here we go. The problem child is back all over again. You know that feeling in your gut when you finally, or the happiness when you finally fix something and you get it out of your hair, and then it comes back, and then you're like, oh, what the heck? And it makes you feel sick to your stomach just thinking about what you went through before and how you may have to go through that again. Well, that's how I felt. And then when I get in the car and turn the key on, I noticed that there was a low brake fluid light. And I'm thinking to myself, I never seen that before. So that's the first thing that I'm going to check. So I get it in the shop, I pop the hood, I pull the little cover off over in the corner, and sure enough, the brake fluid was low. So there's obviously a leak somewhere. My first thought is, go around, check all your calipers and stuff like that, make sure there's no fluid puddling up anywhere. And I didn't see anything, nothing on the back of the tires or no clean spots on the rims. So I pull the plastic off above the reservoir and I look down inside and I see fresh fluid underneath the new module that I installed. So obviously I knew I did something wrong, something happened somewhere, I don't really know. So I pull the plastic apart, pull the windshield wipers and stuff off, pull the assembly off, and I've done this so many times on this vehicle. I know this vehicle like the back of my hand. Like, I know this vehicle better than people that are at the plants that probably work on these vehicles all the time. I can tell you what bolt, what size. For instance, the 2 black bolts that hold the reservoir onto the crossmember, 10mm bolts. The 2 nuts that hold the crossmember onto, 1 nut and 1 bolt onto the vehicle is a 14mm and a 13mm. The bolts that hold the assembly that your fuse panel goes into are 3 10mm bolts. The 3 studs that go through the center of the fuse box down into the connectors are 7mm. And you loosen those up first before you take the top of the fuse panel off. And once you take the top of the fuse panel off, underneath it is the connectors that go into it. So it's a very easy system to take apart. The 4 lines that go to the ABS module are all 13mm line wrenches is what you should be using if you can. If not, a regular wrench is fine. Then you have a 10mm negative cable to pull the negative cable off, to disengage the hybrid system, to depower that. And then even at that, it's still not depowered correctly. You have to go through an entire depowering process. But I've done this so many times on this vehicle, it would take the average tech probably an hour and a half to do everything. I ripped everything apart, had the vehicle fixed, back together, the fluid cleaned up, and the line tightened and filled back up within 20 minutes. But it's because I've done it so many times, I could close my eyes and rip this vehicle apart. My problem child, that was a problem child at one time, has made me very, very good at working on these new Explorers. Ripping all the police equipment out of the center, figuring out what wire goes where to what radio, how it's supposed to be set up in the police vehicle. I know it like the back of my hand. I'm so proficient at doing it that I don't even have to think about it. The pinpoint test is now in my head for a lot of things that I was looking at from what I could use from the passenger vehicle that may have been applicable. So I know exactly where everything's at. I would love to be able to teach about this vehicle based on everything that I've learned over the last few months and how I've been digging into it, because it's just there. You know how you get good at something and you just automatically know where everything's at, you know what to do, you know how to get to it, you know the best way to take things apart, you know if something in the workshop manual does work, it doesn't work, if there's something faster, that's already all ingrained in my head. How to time the windshield wipers better, hood up, loosen the nuts, put the hood back down, pop the windshield wipers off, time them accordingly, make sure that the right windshield wipers on the right side, because guys get them mixed up and then they have to go back and rip everything apart again. It's like I'm thinking about this stuff while I'm working on this vehicle way ahead of time, because this was my problem child that has now led me to being very, very knowledgeable about this vehicle, and I absolutely love it. I love the fact that it stressed me out so much before that I'm very confident with this vehicle now. And then when people ask me questions about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the pin, that's the pin, this is where the connector's at, this is how you get to this panel off, this is how you get to the front of this engine. You're going to need, you know, this type of socket, this length, extension and stuff to pull the water pump off. I've done so much work on this vehicle in general, that I'm very glad that I've had the opportunity to be here to do it, because people come to me in the shop, hey, what's this, what's that, how do you get to this, how do you pull that off, just because I've done it so much. I tightened that bottom line back up, snugged it up the rest of the way. It was already snug, but it's an aluminum body for that ABS module, right, where all the pump solenoids and stuff is, and I didn't want to over tighten those to the point where you end up pulling out that aluminum because of how soft it is. So they were all tight. The bottom one was just a little less tight than the rest of them, and I could see under heavy brake pressure, you could see just a little drip come out of it, and it was enough to trigger the level dropping just a hair. Didn't let any air or anything in it. The level dropped just enough in that reservoir to detect a low level, and it set all kinds of stuff going off. The brakes were wanting to actuate harder than what they were supposed to. It almost seemed like the parking brake was on. So you're going to get multiple codes with this. Just low level alone, it'll set probably a dozen different codes in the computer on this thing. So just by filling the fluid back up, making sure that line was tight, putting everything back together, hooking the battery cables and stuff up, the vehicle was actually able to go through its own self-checks. And a lot of people don't understand the nuances and the sounds of the Explorer. With this vehicle off, this thing will make noise. It will actually operate. And at first I thought, man, there's a squirrel in the vehicle. The first one I ever came across. I went out to the parking lot. I was going to go pull the customer's vehicle in, and I could hear something thumping around inside the engine area by the ABS module. I'm thinking, wait a second, I'm going to pull the plastic and everything off and bang on the bottom of this thing and let the squirrel or raccoon or whatever it is get out of there. It's not what it is. It makes noises. The ABS pump kicks on and off. It does its own self-checks and stuff. It's kind of a weird thing because it makes such loud, distinct noises, you would almost think like an animal's in the engine bay of the vehicle. That's not the case. It makes noises. By the time I even got in the vehicle to even turn the key on, the pump had cycled enough times and it runs its own kind of self-checks. And you don't really find this information in the PTS website like you think you would. Like, the information's there, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's somewhere explained, but it's not out in front of your face. This system inside this vehicle actually operates and does its own checks throughout its cycle of being off. You can hear different things turn on and then they turn off. They do like mini self-checks or something like that. Well, through the process of it doing that, it cycled the valves enough and pulled enough fluid into that ABS module that it realized everything was fine, the level's back up to where it's supposed to be, and it actually turned all the lights off for me. So when I got back into the vehicle, put it in reverse, hitting the brake, it was beautiful. I ran it through a quick bleeding process just to make sure that nothing happened, but it wasn't even necessary. I went to back up, the brakes were nice. I went to pull out, the brakes were nice. I went ahead and cleared all the codes just in case. One thing to mention is, on these sync systems in these Explorers, you're not going to get rid of the U0 or the U0100 codes. They're there. It's not going to cause any lights to pop on or anything like that. With like the sync system, you're going to have on the cop cars, there will be like 4 codes that set in the computer for the trailer module. There's no trailer modules on the cop car. Those codes are going to be there, but it won't set a light. So just kind of going over some brief explanation on the nuances, the how-to, my history with the 2020 Ford Explorer, and my continuing effort to learn it even more, to be able to provide better information for you guys. I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for understanding that even as long as I've been doing this, anybody can make a mistake. And it was as simple as tightening a line, filling up the fluid, letting it run through its self-checks, and it cleared itself. And that's literally all it was. The brakes are fabulous in this thing. And just a little bit of an update on just some 2020 Explorer talk. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Have a blessed day. Subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, share it with somebody who you think might be interested in some of this stuff. Maybe somebody's confused about the sounds the Explorer makes, or certain things, how they come apart. Pass them my way. I will explain to them. I've had like a dozen texts from different Ford dealerships across the United States this month alone reach out to me and say, hey, I've seen your video on this. Maybe you could explain how to do this a little bit better over the phone instead of in a video. And I've been more than happy to explain things to them. I have no problem at all. Other mom and pop shops, hey, I got a customer in here right now in an emergency situation, and I'm trying to figure out, do I need to have this vehicle towed to the dealership to get this water pump fixed? Yeah, you kind of do. It's still under warranty. They want to do the work. But if they're set on you doing it and not taking it back to the dealership, please make sure it's documented very well and it's kept with the warranty files that the customer keeps. And this is how you do it. And you got to be helpful to people. This is how we build relationships. This is how we network, and we communicate, and we talk with each other. And this is how you build friendships. So again, thank you guys. I love you all. Be blessed.